Welcome back, boxing fans, to another great show with Sean on boxing. As you can tell by the title today, we're going to be looking at Andre Ward and Roman Chocolatito Gonzalez in depthly, because obviously these two fighters are connected. At one time, Roman Gonzalez was considered the pound for pound number one fighter in boxing, but unfortunately, certain American boxing fans or boxing channels were in their feelings because of that. Because obviously, Roman Gonzalez is not a black American. He's pretty black, but he's not a black American. And there's no way a non black American can ever be considered pound for pound number one. So they had a big issue. And this is just going to take a little bit of a look into this because I saw today that JB, of course, does what he always does. He consistently tries to build up black American fighters by defaming and criticizing and downplaying non-black fighters. Whether we're talking about a Manny Pacquiao, an Inouye, a Roman Gonzalez, a Gennady Golovkin, a Vasily Lomachenko, a Canelo Alvarez, it doesn't matter. If there's any great fighter that's not black American, him and the Egos and Dantes and LDBC are going to find a way to somehow shit all over them, discredit them, and use them to build up black American fighters. Right? And the reality is, you can fanboy and cheer for a black American fighter. You don't need to discredit and downplay other fighters. But unfortunately, this is their MO. This is what these channels consistently do. There was no need for JB to make a video this week discrediting Roman Gonzalez. But this is what he's consistently done. He's made videos after video after video shitting on Roman Gonzalez because he was considered pound for pound number one. Shitting on Kovalev because he was considered pound for pound number one. Shitting on Golovkin because he was considered pound for pound number one. Shitting on Canelo because he was considered pound for pound number one. Shitting on Lomachenko because he was considered pound for pound number one. Shitting on Pacquiao because he was considered pound for pound number one. Do you see the trend? And his beef was whenever these fighters were considered pound for pound number one, there was a black fighter who probably deserved to get the credit instead. Maybe it's true, maybe it's not. But the reality is, for people that are protesting racism, being complete racists doesn't help your cause. But let's get into this. Stay tuned and we'll break this down. And feel free to leave your comments in the comment section below. So let's get into this. We're going to look at Andre Ward's resume first because, in truth, his resume is much shorter. This guy literally today was criticizing Roman Gonzalez, talking about who did he fight? You can only tell me two fighters he's faced. He didn't fight anybody. Even though we've had these conversations for years. John Boxing only liked Inouye back in the day because he used Inouye because he was trying to discredit and downplay Roman Gonzalez. And there was no black American fighter he could support. So he supported Inouye, came out and said Inouye was his favorite fighter. And then we really see the truth to the statement because now all he does is shit on Inouye, his favorite fighter, apparently. But this is how transparent people like him are, right? If they give any credit to a non-black fighter, it's not fucking legitimate. It's not based on truth. It's somehow trying to build up a story, build up a narrative. So we'll look at that right now and break it down. So who is the real legend? Andre Ward or Roman Gonzalez? So here we go. Andre Ward retired 32-0 with 16 KOs and has been indoctrinated into the Hall of Fame. Roman Gonzalez currently is 32-4, 42 knockouts and 52 wins, which at these weight classes is fucking unprecedented. There's not many fighters at these lower weight classes that was such a dominant fighter as Roman Gonzalez was throughout the years. He was literally the one that carried the lighter weights on his back until obviously guys like Inouye and others, Bam Rodriguez, actually came into it. And really, he opened the doors for those fighters. And obviously, there was fighters before him that did the same. Guys like the great Olympian, what's his name? Carbajal, and obviously Ricardo Lopez, who was also an undefeated fighter, 48-0, I think he was. So, there's obviously been great smaller fighters historically, but in this era, Roman Gonzalez was the king. He was the one that was getting talked about back in 2012, being talked about as a potential pound for pound top 10 fighter back in 2012, well before Golovkin's team decided to put him on their undercard to try to build up and showcase Golovkin by really sort of building that Latino fan base underneath of him. Hence, putting on Mexican hats and trying to relate to Mexican fans, putting Roman Gonzalez and the Superflies on the undercards, and so on and so forth. But thanks to that and HBO, it really sort of opened the doors in the United States to these smaller fighters. It's not that he opened the doors to these fighters in general. Roman Gonzalez obviously was fighting out of Japan and Central South America prior to that, and was considered one of the best fighters in boxing well before casual Americans finally learned who he was. But let's move forward and break this down. So here are the 6 champions that Andre Ward fought in his career. 6. He's fought 6 world champions in his career. I mean, I think even Tank Davis has done more than that, if I just think off the top of my head. This is not legendary. This is not that impressive. What was impressive is that he beat Arthur Abraham, I think Bika, Froch, and Kessler as part of the Super 6 tournament. But all of those fighters, Bika was a replacement opponent, and maybe he wasn't part of the Super 6. There was a few replacement opponents during that series because obviously people got hurt, like Taylor and others. But a case in point, this guy who was really a prospect, along with Durrell, neither who were world champions, but the only 2 Americans involved in this tournament. All the other fighters like Kessler, obviously Froch, Arthur Abraham, Taylor, I can't remember who else was there. I guess just those 4. They were all previously world champions. Obviously, Arthur Abraham moved up from middleweight to join this tournament, along with Taylor, who moved up to join this tournament from middleweight. Carl Froch and Kessler were 2 what people call today Eurobums, which obviously weren't really well known in America, but obviously had fought, I think, previously before the Super 6 tournament, if I can't be mistaken. I'm not looking at their resume off the top of my head right now. Arthur Abraham obviously was a middleweight champion, but another Eurobum who was fighting primarily out of Germany and wasn't really well known in the States. So Taylor was really the number 1 fighter, obviously an undisputed champion who beat Bernard Hopkins back in the day. But since then, it obviously lost to Kelly Pavlik and was coming off of a knockout loss prior to joining this tournament, and then got knocked out in the first fight of this tournament, and then obviously was replaced, I think, by Alan Green and Sakio Bika as well, I think was a replacement in the tournament. But correct me if I'm wrong. So we look at this. Sakio Bika ended up winning a world championship, but was never considered an elite fighter, right? Sakio Bika was a tough motherfucker, but he was always the kind of guy who ended up losing the big fight. African fighting out of Australia, never knocked out, tough as nails. When we look at really what he did in his career, he lost to Australian Sam Solomon early in his career. Sam Solomon, a middleweight fighter who ended up becoming a world champion. Had a draw with Marcus Bayer, a German world champion. Got outboxed and beat by Joe Calzaghe. Ended up facing Lucien Boutte. Ended up getting beat for him for the IBF Eliminator, which allowed Boutte to move forward to become a champion. Rematch Solomon, beat him in the rematch. Probably his best win to date. Lost to Jean-Paul Mendy prior to facing Andre Ward. He was coming off of a loss. And then after the Andre Ward loss, he fought Andre Durrell to a draw, lost to Anthony Durrell in the rematch, then got beat by Adonis Stevenson and fought Sam Solomon again, the Australian trilogy, beating him in an 8-rounder. So 2 victories against Sam Solomon, a domestic Australian who at one point was a middleweight world champion. He ended up becoming a champion, and obviously lost it very early. I can't remember who he even beat to get the title, but nonetheless, he was not a Hall of Famer or a legend by any stretch of the world. And then, of course, you have my man, Arthur Abraham. Arthur Abraham was a tough son of a bitch, tough German fighter, 30 knockouts and 47 wins. I think he beat Bika with a broken jaw, if I can remember correctly. Obviously Armenian, but fighting out of Germany. You know, his resume obviously had a lot more. Beat Howard Eastman, uh, beat Kofi Jantu, beat Edison Miranda. Oh, Edison Miranda, that's the guy that he beat with a broken jaw, I think. Beat Miranda again in the rematch, beat Raul Marquez, beat Jermaine Taylor prior to the Super 6 tournament, knocking him out in the 12th round. And then got disqualified facing Andre Durrell, hitting him late in the 11th round, which really basically ruined his career. Ended up losing to Carl Froch, lost to Andre Ward, beat Robert Stieglitz, a German fighter, a German champion, rematched Stieglitz, and ended up getting knocked out in 3 rounds. Faced Stieglitz again for the 3rd time, beat him by split decision. Faced Paul Smith 2 times, faced Stieglitz for the 4th time, beat him, stopped him in 6 rounds. Faced Martin Murray, and then obviously faced Roberto Zurdo Ramirez, got beat by him. Faced Chris Eubank, got beat by him, and basically that was the end of his career. Out of all the best wins of his career, I mean, Stieglitz, he fought 4 times. He was really a domestic German fighter. The best win, Jermaine Taylor, by far. Jermaine Taylor win was a very good one. And obviously an Edison Miranda. But all those wins were at middleweight, right? Before moving to 168. He was not a very big fighter. So going to 168 was just obviously to join this tournament. Mikhail Kessler. You know, Mikhail Kessler was a fan favorite. Obviously, he was first known because he faced Joe Calzaghe back in the day. And that was when he first really got recognized by boxing people. Prior to that, nobody really knew who he was. He fought Anthony Mundine, faced Eric Lucas, a Canadian fighter, faced Marcus Bayer, fought Librito Andrade, who were all quality opponents, but none of them were elite. And then obviously because of facing these good opponents and winning, he got a world title fight against Joe Calzaghe, ended up losing in that fight. Then he joined the Super Series tournament, lost a Ward, beat Froch, beat Alan Green, and then in his last fight of his career, he got beat by Carl Froch. And I think, if I can remember correctly, that fight was a fucking war and a great fight. So you can see here, like, what was the best win on his resume? Obviously, he lost to Froch. He beat Froch once. That was obviously the best win of his career. You know, and then obviously Mundine, Lucas, Bayer, and Andrade are good wins, and that's it. So 1 win against Carl Froch, ending his career 1-1 against Carl Froch, is his claim to fame, right? If you want to be completely honest. And then we get Carl Froch, the Cobra. You know, Carl Froch was a good fighter, a guy that clout chased, obviously, Joe Calzaghe his whole career. Was facing a bunch of not really anybody's till 2009 or 2008 when he faced Jean Pascal in what was a fucking war. He ended up beating Jean Pascal to become a champion. Then faced Jermaine Taylor, beat him, stopping him in 12 rounds. Then faced Andre Durrell, won a controversial split decision. It was a very close fight. He could have lost that fight. In my opinion, I felt he did. Then fought Kessler, lost to Kessler, bounced back, beating Arthur Abraham. Beat a tough veteran fighter, Glenn Johnson, who was well past his best at that time. Then lost Andre Ward. Fought Lucien Boutte in probably one of the best wins of his career. And then beat Kessler in a rematch. And then beat Groves in 2 very good fights back to back. So, you know, with Groves, Kessler, Boutte, and Arthur Abraham, and Durrell, and Taylor, and Pascal, by and far, you know, Carl Froch is the best fighter on Andre Ward's resume with 7 real legitimate victories, right, in his career. Really legitimate, right? Then Chad Dawson, who Andre Ward pulled down from 175 pounds all the way to 168. If it wasn't Andre Ward, and that was, say, Lomachenko or Canelo Alvarez or somebody else that did that, we know what would be said. But with Andre Ward, he gets a pass. So Andre Ward fought Chad Dawson, bring him all the way down to 168, where he ended up beating him. Then he went back up to 175, got knocked out by Adonis Stevenson, and basically that was the end of his career. This was a guy that, beat Eric Harding, which was a good win when he beat him. Thomas Adamek was a solid win. Beat an old-ass Glenn Johnson. Beat Antonio Tarver 2 times, which was good. Beat Glenn Johnson for a second time. Ended up losing to Jean Pascal. Had a no contest to Bernard Hopkins. Beat him by majority decision in the rematch. I guess the biggest, most significant win of his career. And then got knocked out by Andre Ward in 10 rounds. And then got knocked out by Adonis Stevenson in 1 round. And then after that, he just became a punching bag who lost to most of the good opponents he faced. So, when you look at his career, obviously B-Hop win was good. A Tarver win was good. Thomas Adamek win was good. Thomas Adamek was undefeated at the time. Eric Harding win was good. So there you go. 4 quality victories on his resume. Not quite Carl Froch. And then we move to, of course, the last big fight of his career, the last champion, Sergey Kovalev. A fight that, based on a controversial victory, people used to elevate him to pound-for-pound number 1. Upset that Golovkin was elevated to number 1 after a draw with Canelo, which was controversial. Most people feel that Canelo lost that fight and Golovkin won. In this case, it was the opposite, right? Kovalev, most people feel, won, but Andre Ward got the decision. And people were happy to push him into that number 1 pound-for-pound rating. The irony, right? Because the majority of people felt Golovkin beat Canelo, right? And that's why, I guess, Ring Magazine or whoever was in charge ended up putting Golovkin pound-for-pound number 1, which seems ridiculous coming off of a draw, but nonetheless. And in this case, it was controversial. And at first, Ward talked about not wanting the rematch with Kovalev, which would have been terrible if that would have been the situation. But let's look at his career. Obviously, Kovalev was a very good fighter, but personal issues and lack of discipline were obviously the worst things of his career. Beat Lionel Thompson, which now in hindsight is a great win because Lionel Thompson just had a really significant win a few years ago. And since that win, upsetting the apple cart, the PBC has basically blackballed him. Right? He beat him, stopping him in 3 rounds. Right? Who did Lionel Thompson beat recently? Let's go back and check that out. Lionel Thompson was totally jobbed, man. What a fucking robbery. Jose Ustateki, right? Who obviously was one of the top PBC fighters at 168 pounds. He ended up beating him by decision in 2019 and hasn't got a fight from the PBC since then. Has basically been blackballed his whole career, right? But people don't talk about that, but that was fucking terrible. Then he beat Gabriel Campila, who was an ex-world champion, Nathan Cleverly, who was undefeated at the time, Ismail Salah, who people were really hyping up, Blake Capello, obviously beat an old Bernard Hopkins, beat Jean Pascal, dominating, destroying him, ex-champion Najid Mohammadi, beat Jean Pascal in the rematch, beat very tough Isaac Chilemba, and then obviously lost to Ward 2 times. Bounced back, beating Shabransky, Igor McCallan, and obviously champion Eliander Alvarez, and then Anthony Yard, and then obviously lost to Canelo Alvarez and beat Pulev's brother at cruiserweight, who was undefeated, and recently is coming off of a loss to another undefeated cruiserweight, losing a unanimous decision. So 1-1 at his move to cruiserweight. Obviously hasn't really fought for world titles, but fought 2 undefeated up-and-coming young fighters, beat one, lost to the other, but didn't show the power or dominance. Is obviously being much more of a boxer than he was at light heavyweight. Obviously, the Anthony Yard, Alvarez, Pascal, Hopkins, those wins were very good wins, you know. So there you go. Uh, so I'm not trying to criticize or hate on Ward, but people were happy to see Ward become a pound for pound fighter over James Toney, right? If we look at James Toney's resume and the big wins he has, it far supersedes fucking Andre Ward's career. And it ain't even fucking close. It ain't even close. But let's move forward and look at Roman Gonzalez. So Roman Gonzalez, I'm not going to go through every single guy because there's just too many world champions he's faced in comparison to Andre Ward. Obviously, he faced Juan Francisco Estrada back in 2012, a very big fight, beat him, ended up getting robbed in the second fight, and convincingly got beaten in the third fight, having a historical trilogy with Estrada. Beat Rocky Fuentes, ex-champion, Yuka Nida. Obviously, I fucked up Takayama's resume. Takayama beat Yagashi. I remember when that fight happened. That fight was really fucking hyped up. This was his opportunity, I think, to become a three-weight world champion. I think that was the situation. I think Yagashi was the first fighter he faced at 112 pounds. Yagashi at that time was the world champion, and Roman Gonzalez, moving up to his third weight, went out there and fucking was brilliant. If you haven't seen that fight, it's on YouTube. Go check it out. You can check out all these fights on YouTube and really see how dominant and fucking great Roman Gonzalez was, and his just punch output, how fluid his punches were, just the way he was a non-stop energizer bunny, using his offense for defense, slipping punches from the inside and countering, changing speeds, changing power. People really tried to disrespect him, but that's because they're too stupid to really understand the game. If you ask anybody that's really in boxing, boxer or trainer, they have nothing but fucking great things to say about Roman Gonzalez. Then Francisco Rodriguez, who's still relevant today. He was one of the defenses that Junto Nakatani had at 115 pounds and went the distance with Junto Nakatani, which at this point is pretty impressive considering when he fought Roman Gonzalez, it was fucking, I don't know, 8 years ago. Then most recently, you have, of course, Moses Fuentes, who is an ex-minimum weight world champion, beat a historical great, I think, Puerto Rican fighter. Beat Carlos Cuadras in what was a fight of the year, beat William McRoyal, beat Talia Fai, coming off of his first career loss and then his first career stoppage. Only stopped once, obviously, by Rung Basai. Lost a controversial first fight to Rung Basai, a fight that I feel he was robbed on and should have got the victory. And if he would have got the victory, he would have ended up getting a Nui unification fight. So really us fans got fucked over because of that terrible scorecard. Then faced Jafai coming off of that knockout loss. Was an underdog. Nobody thought he was going to win. Obviously, he'd lost and then got knocked out in devastating fashion by a hard-punching Thai fighter. Went in there and fucking took Kaliafai apart, destroying him, scoring a sensational knockout with a great right hand. Then, obviously, Edgar Sosa, a great champion back in the day. Brian Valora, one of the great U.S. Olympic fighters at the smaller weight classes. A guy who was well known for his great display of jump rope skills. And obviously now his son is a world or like a professional fighter too. And then Julio Cesar Martinez, who moved up in weight. Julio Cesar Martinez was favored to beat Roman Gonzalez. Some people thought he was going to do the same thing to Roman Gonzalez that Rung Basai had done, because there was a lot of similarities between Martinez and Rung Basai. Really two-handed, hard-punching fighters, a little unorthodox, but devastating power. But Roman Gonzalez pitched a fucking masterclass, embarrassing this younger kid, showing people that there's literally fucking levels to this game, and sent his ass back down to 112 pounds. And then, so right there, what did we say? So 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 world champions Roman Gonzalez has faced in his career. 14. Andre Ward, 6. But we're supposed to believe that Roman Gonzalez didn't fight great competition, right? That he's overhyped, that he's not that good, that his resume is trash and he hasn't done anything. But yet you look at the fact that he fought 14 world champions, covering 4 weight divisions to become a 4-weight world champion, right? And coming back at this age where he is now, getting a world title and being in unification fights with Estrada at this point of his career. Right now, I think he's 37 years old, just a few years younger than Andre Ward. And then what are they doing to add to their legacy? Well, we know what Andre Ward is doing. Andre Ward goes out of his way day after day, video after video, year after year, to basically clout chase off of Canelo Alvarez, a fighter that he's super jealous of. Because unlike him, Canelo Alvarez is a pay-per-view superstar who's made buckets of money. Andre Ward's only 2 pay-per-view fights were against Kovalev. Both did miserable, terrible numbers, right? And then obviously walked away from potentially big fights against Carl Froch, Lucien Bute, and Adonis Stevenson. 3 fights that would have guaranteed him his biggest paydays of his career, but yet he avoided all 3 of them. 2 chances to become undisputed in 2 weight divisions, doing what Canelo Alvarez obviously did at 168 years later, which Ward could have done, but chose not to do. And obviously doing what Bivol and Beterbiev are going to be doing this year at light heavyweight, he could have done after the Kovalev victory. But he chose not to do any of these things, which would have truly been legacy, and chose just to retire prematurely and just consistently fucking talk shit about Canelo Alvarez and discredit him. Yet his resume doesn't even fucking hold a candle to Roman Gonzales, nevertheless to fucking Canelo Alvarez, right? And what's Roman Gonzales doing? Right now, Roman is aiming to become a 5th weight world champion. He just had a fight at bantamweight, winning in very good fashion. Let me see. I can't remember the specifics. Let me go back. What? Yeah, submit it. Get out of here. So, ratings. Come on. Huh? What are you talking about? Ratings. Fucking box wreck. Superfly. Roman Gonzales. So Roman Gonzales just beat Robert Barrera, 27-5, stopping him in the 10th round of his bantamweight debut, right? In his 5th weight division, he just faced a solid fighter, not a world champion, but it was his first fight at that weight to test it out. Fought very well. And interesting enough, years earlier, he beat Robert Barrera's brother, Robert Barrera, right? So he's beaten both brothers throughout his career. And now he's in line to, and this is what the rumors are, we're not sure specifically how it's going to go. If we look at this fight with Robert Barrera, I'm not sure if it was for any specific belt or rankings or anything else. It doesn't say, so I'm not sure if it puts him in line for anything. But nonetheless, now he potentially, from what we hear, is trying to fight one of the 2 Japanese bantamweight champions, Takai, who is 9-0 with 8 knockouts, coming off of an impressive victory in his last fight to win the title, and obviously Nishida, who beat Emmanuel Rodriguez even more impressively. Nishida is much more of a boxer, obviously not a big puncher, but a very skilled fighter, whereas Takai is a little reckless and a little wild, a little more like Rungvisai and Martinez, heavy puncher, big puncher, and a guy that come forward. So, ultimately, I could understand that maybe they would be chasing after Takai, but I think Takai is going to be fighting on Inui's undercard, so we have to sort of see how it unfolds. And just recently, even though it's been talked about how Jesse Bam Rodriguez and Roman Gonzales wouldn't fight each other because they're both promoted by Tekken Promotion, a promotional company out of Japan. And obviously, we just heard the big hype that they were in sparring in preparation for Jesse Rodriguez's fight with Juan Francisco Estrada, and people said the sparring was fucking incredible, right? You're gonna shit on Roman Gonzalez, but literally everyone that watched him spar with the 21, 22-year-old Jesse Bam Rodriguez, who now most people have on their pound for pound list, apparently was fucking incredible sparring. People said the best sparring they've ever seen, right? But yes, Roman Gonzalez is overrated. He's a hype job. He's not that good, right? It makes no fucking sense at all that when a 37-year-old is fighting a prime pound for pound fighter and performing so well in sparring, and I know it's just sparring, but it's really hyped up that fight. And Roman Gonzalez just came out this week and said that he would be more than willing to fight Jesse Rodriguez as long as the money was correct, right? If you're going to take on a pound for pound fighter like Jesse Bam Rodriguez, obviously you want to make sure you're compensated properly. That's the same reason why Estrada said, yes, I'm going to rematch, because he also just made his career best payday fighting Jesse Bam Rodriguez. So obviously Roman Gonzalez is looking at two good fights in Japan to do something historical, become a 5-weight world champion, something less than 10 fighters in boxing history have achieved, right? Or potentially getting that big payday fighting a potential pound for pound fighter. For me, I would prefer if he moved up and faced Takai to try to become a 5-weight world champion. Stylistically, Takai is, like I said, very similar to, Rongvisai and what's his face, Martinez. So I think it'd be a very exciting fight. Obviously, Takai is a very aggressive, hard puncher, but Roman Gonzalez showed against Martinez how he was able to dominate that kind of rudimentary power puncher, right? Kind of the same way people feel that Shakur Stevenson will beat Tank Davis. Nishida, on the other hand, is much more of a boxer and mover, so stylistically, it doesn't look like it's going to be as interesting of a fight. Roman would have to track him down all night to try to get into range to throw his combination punching. Obviously, a Bam Rodriguez Roman Gonzalez fight would be great, but at the same time, I kind of feel bad for Jesse Bam Rodriguez if you're just going to be making your name by beating the last generation of fighters, right? It's nice you're cleaning out the last generation of fighters, but when are you going to lay claim to this generation by fighting the guys now at this time, right? We know that another guy from the last generation, Ioka, just got beat by Fernando Martinez, the Argentinian fighter, recently as well. So most people would prefer to see Bam Rodriguez fight him for unification, right? Fighting a prime, aggressive fighter. Obviously, stylistically, that fight would be fucking unbelievable, right? And then you still have Tanaka, the WBO champion, who's also prime, right? Younger than the Argentinian fighter, and obviously currently the WBO champion. If Bam was able to beat him as well, he could become an undisputed champion at 115 pounds, which is a great legacy move for him. And then if he wanted to move up in weight and then take on Roman Gonzalez, that would make tons of sense. Roman could become a 5-weight world champion, and then Jesse would be moving to his 3rd weight division, taking on a living legend after literally proving himself at 115 pounds. And by moving up and beating Roman Gonzalez, it really potentially builds up a fight many boxing fans are really, 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 really excited about, which is a Bam Rodriguez versus a Junto Nakatani bantamweight unification fight, right? So sure, Bam would be using Roman Gonzalez to continue to build up his career, but generally in boxing, that ultimately is what happens, right? Roman Gonzalez is only going to be king for so long before a younger, better fighter is going to come and kick him off the mountain. And obviously, currently, that fighter is Jesse Bam Rodriguez, right? Which is no shade towards, obviously, Roman Gonzalez. If Andre Ward would have stuck around longer, ultimately, he would have ended up getting beat by younger fighters as well, whether that was a Bivol or some other up-and-coming fighter. But let me know in the comment section below, what do you think about these two fighters, this comparison? Obviously, one guy who currently is still active and still adding to his legacy, right? This is kind of a comparison between Floyd Mayweather and Manny Pacquiao. When Floyd Mayweather was fighting fights that meant nothing just to collect money, Manny Pacquiao was beating Keith Thurman to become a legitimate world champion. at 40 years old, or however old he was when he fought Keith Thurman, but obviously well past his best, adding to his legacy. Whereas Floyd added his last legacy fight against Andre Berto, right? Andre Berto, and then obviously Conor McGregor. Neither of those are legacy fights at all. So, this is kind of similar. People are trying to dismiss and downplay Roman Gonzalez, but he's literally still adding to his legacy. Whereas Andre Ward is cloud chasing to sell his novel. But let me know what you think in the comment section below. Thanks for watching, everybody, and I will see you next time. Tomorrow, I am going to do a video on this week's upcoming fights. Obviously, it's a fucking great week. I already paid for my pay-per-view on DAZN, which is why I prefer if every promotional company worked out of DAZN, because look, it's easy. Now I can watch it on my big TV, go live with you guys on Sunday my time, Saturday night your time. I already paid for it, so I'm ready to stream it and ready to talk about a fucking great boxing card in the US. A card that, unfortunately, a lot of these big American YouTube channels are dismissing, downplaying, and ignoring. Yet they're boxing fans. Right? You know the old adage, seeing is believing. And in this case, these channels show you exactly fucking what they want you to see, that they're just not about boxing. But leave your comments below. Thanks for watching, and I will see you next time. Tune in on Sunday for my live, and we can watch what is going to be a great card sponsored by Turki Al Sheikh in Saudi Arabia in California. Pound for pound top fighter. Bud Crawford is going to be taking on Israel Madrimov to become a 4-weight world champion. That shit is legendary. So stay tuned, and I'll see you then. Peace out.